Have you ever found yourself pouring your heart into helping others, only to feel drained, unappreciated, or even taken advantage of? Imagine this: you give your time, energy, and resources selflessly, believing you're doing the right thing. But instead of gratitude, you're met with indifference or worse, exploitation. How does that make you feel? In today's episode of Buddha's Odyssey, we'll uncover an ancient yet profoundly relevant teaching of the Buddha that explains why kindness, when offered without discernment, can sometimes invite disrespect. This isn't just about generosity, it's about reclaiming your power, protecting your peace, and transforming your compassion into a force that not only uplifts others but also strengthens you. Through an inspiring parable and real-life reflections, we'll explore how the wisdom of boundaries can elevate your kindness to a higher plane, one where you no longer feel depleted but energized, no longer feel used but respected. Imagine walking away from acts of kindness not with regret but with fulfillment. What if you could give in a way that brought balance to your life, rather than imbalance? Stay with us as we reveal a story of redemption, a lesson in discernment, and a timeless path to turning kindness into empowerment. You won't want to miss the transformative wisdom in today's journey. Now, let's begin. Part 1: The dual nature of kindness. Kindness, as emphasized by the Buddha, is indeed one of the most esteemed virtues in human life. It has the power to mend broken hearts, heal emotional wounds, and create connections between individuals. Yet, as with any virtue, kindness must be exercised with discernment. Without boundaries, it can transform from a gift into a burden, not only depleting the giver's resources but also harming the receiver by enabling behaviors that lack accountability. This delicate balance is illustrated vividly in the story of a villager who sought the Buddha's wisdom after his well-meaning actions led to unintended suffering. The villager, a simple and compassionate man, lived in a quiet settlement surrounded by lush fields and rolling hills. His kindness was well known among his neighbors, as he often gave without hesitation to those in need. One fateful day, a group of travelers arrived in his village. They appeared weary and destitute, their faces marked by hunger and exhaustion. The villager, moved by their plight, immediately offered them all he could spare: his food, his water, even his modest savings that he had painstakingly set aside for his family. As night fell, the travelers thanked him and retired to rest. However, when dawn broke, they were gone, and so was everything else the villager owned. They had taken more than he had offered, leaving him with nothing but regret. Desperate for clarity, the villager made the arduous journey to the monastery where the Buddha resided. Kneeling before the enlightened one under the sacred Bodhi tree, he recounted his tale, his voice trembling with sorrow. "Great teacher," he began, "I have followed your teachings, showing kindness to all who crossed my path. Yet my kindness has brought me nothing but pain. What have I done wrong?" The Buddha listened attentively, his eyes filled with compassion, and after a moment of silence, he spoke. "Your heart is indeed kind, but kindness without wisdom is like a river without banks. It floods and drowns all in its path." This story encapsulates a profound lesson. Kindness, when given indiscriminately, can lead to consequences that neither the giver nor the receiver truly desires. For the villager, his unchecked generosity left him not only vulnerable to exploitation but also empty and disheartened. This is a universal experience. Consider moments in your own life where you said yes too often, fearing rejection or guilt. Perhaps you lent money to a friend who never repaid you, or you overcommitted at work, leaving your personal responsibilities neglected. These moments, though painful, are invitations to reflect on the Buddha's wisdom. The Buddha's teachings offer a path forward, one rooted in mindfulness and clarity. Kindness should not be an impulsive act but a deliberate one, guided by discernment and an understanding of both the giver's capacity and the receiver's true needs. By setting boundaries, we ensure that our kindness is not only sustainable but also meaningful. For the villager, this meant learning to see beyond the surface, to recognize genuine need and to protect his heart from being exploited. Through this transformation, his kindness did not diminish, it grew wiser and more impactful, like a river that flows with purpose, guided by strong, steady banks. This lesson resonates across cultures and contexts, reminding us that true kindness is an art of balance. It is not about withholding or becoming guarded, but about giving in a way that uplifts both the giver and the receiver. Just as the Buddha advised the villager, we too must learn to offer our kindness mindfully, ensuring that it brings peace rather than pain. This is the dual nature of kindness, a virtue that, when paired with wisdom, becomes a source of strength and harmony for all. Let this story be a reflection point for how we approach our own acts of compassion in everyday life. Part 2, The Parable of King Ananda's Garden. The parable of King Ananda's garden is a powerful reminder of how unguarded generosity, even when driven by noble intentions, can lead to unintended consequences. King Ananda's garden was a masterpiece of nature, filled with vibrant flowers, fruitful trees, and tranquil pathways. Wanting to share its beauty, the king opened the gates to everyone, believing his generosity would bring joy and harmony to his people. At first, visitors marveled at the garden's splendor and appreciated the gift. But over time, their carelessness began to take a toll. Flowers were plucked recklessly, trees were stripped bare, and paths were trampled into barren dirt. Litter accumulated, and the once thriving oasis became a shadow of its former self, a wasteland that reflected not only neglect but also the unintended harm caused by boundless kindness. Heartbroken, the king sought advice from a visiting sage, a man renowned for his wisdom. The sage observed the desolate garden and the sorrow in the king's eyes. "Your intentions are noble," the sage began, "but kindness without wisdom is like water poured into a cracked vessel. It cannot be sustained, nor can it nourish those who need it." He explained that true kindness is not about giving without limits, it is about creating conditions that allow generosity to thrive without being depleted. The sage suggested that the king establish boundaries for the garden, allowing only a limited number of visitors at a time and educating them on how to respect and care for the space. This was not an act of withholding but a way to ensure that the garden's beauty and resources could be preserved for generations to come. The king, inspired by the sage's words, took immediate action. He placed signs at the garden's entrance, inviting visitors to enjoy its splendor but also urging them to tread carefully and take only what they needed. He restricted access to small groups and designated caretakers to maintain the garden's balance. Over time, the garden began to recover. Flowers bloomed again, trees bore fruit, and the air regained its sweet, fragrant quality. Visitors, now mindful of the privilege they had been given, treated the garden with respect, and it became a sanctuary not only for its beauty but also for the lessons it symbolized. This parable is more than just a tale of a garden, it's a reflection of our own lives and resources. The garden represents the energy, time, and love we offer to others. When we give indiscriminately, we risk depleting these resources and diminishing their value. Imagine a parent who gives in to every demand from their child, hoping to show love, only to find that their generosity fosters entitlement rather than gratitude. Or consider an employee who takes on every task, believing they are being helpful, only to face burnout and diminished performance. Just as the king's garden needed boundaries to flourish, so too do our acts of kindness require structure and mindfulness. The sage's advice highlights a universal truth: boundaries are not barriers, they are enablers of sustainable generosity. When we set limits, we protect both ourselves and the value of what we offer. This is not about denying kindness but about ensuring it is delivered in ways that uplift both the giver and the receiver. The garden flourished again, not because kindness was withheld, but because it was paired with wisdom and thoughtful intention. In reflecting on King Ananda's transformation, it becomes clear that generosity is most powerful when it is rooted in mindfulness. The parable teaches us that the quality of our giving is more important than its quantity. True kindness is not about endless sacrifice, it is about creating harmony and balance, allowing what we give to inspire and uplift without leaving us depleted. By setting boundaries, we ensure that our generosity remains a source of strength and renewal, much like King Ananda's garden, which thrived once it was nurtured with care and discernment. Part 3. Wisdom in Action. The villager's transformation embodies the evolution from an instinctive desire to help into a refined practice of mindful compassion. Initially, his kindness was rooted in genuine concern for others, but it lacked the structure to discern genuine need from exploitation. When the exploiters returned to his village, he did not respond with bitterness or defensiveness. Instead, he displayed a profound understanding of boundaries as tools for mutual respect. By calmly asserting his limits, the villager made it clear that his kindness was still available, but only for those who would value and respect it. This was not a denial of his compassionate nature but an elevation of it. He had learned to give in ways that uplifted both himself and others. This transformation echoes the principle of tough love, a concept often discussed in the realms of parenting and personal relationships. Tough love is not about withholding affection or assistance but about providing guidance that may be difficult yet ultimately beneficial. Imagine a parent who refuses to fulfill every whim of their child. At first glance, this might appear harsh, but in reality, it teaches the child resilience, self-reliance, and a deeper appreciation for what they are given. Similarly, in friendships or partnerships, setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable, but it fosters mutual respect and prevents one party from feeling overburdened or taken for granted. When we analyze the villager's actions through this lens, it becomes evident that boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to healthier relationships. By drawing a line, he communicated a powerful message: kindness must be met with respect. When the travelers recognized their wrongdoing and sought forgiveness, it was not just the villager who experienced growth, so did they. His boundaries inspired introspection and accountability, demonstrating that kindness, when combined with wisdom, has the potential to transform both giver and receiver. The Buddha's teaching on this matter is profoundly practical. True kindness is not measured by how much you give but by how wisely you give. This wisdom is often guided by the principle of sustainability. If you give until you are empty, whether it's your time, energy, or resources, you are left with nothing to sustain yourself or others. This is why the concept of filling your own cup is so vital. A depleted giver cannot provide meaningful support. When we care for ourselves, we create the capacity to care for others in a way that is impactful and enduring. Reflecting on the villager's journey, it's clear that his discernment allowed him to reclaim control over his kindness. This is a lesson many of us can relate to in our daily lives. Think about the countless times you might have said yes out of guilt, only to feel resentful afterward. Or the moments when you overextended yourself, believing that saying no would diminish your worth. These experiences teach us that indiscriminate giving often leads to exhaustion and bitterness, undermining the very spirit of kindness. To act with wisdom, as the villager did, requires a shift in perspective. We must learn to see boundaries not as limitations but as opportunities to protect and nurture what we value most. Setting these limits allows us to engage with the world in a way that is both compassionate and sustainable. It ensures that what we give comes from a place of abundance, not depletion. The Buddha's timeless lesson is a call to action for all of us. By practicing discernment, we ensure that our kindness is both meaningful and sustainable. This doesn't mean shutting ourselves off from the world, it means engaging with it more thoughtfully. It means recognizing that our resources, whether they are time, energy, or love, are finite, and that it is our responsibility to steward them wisely. the villager's story reminds us that boundaries are not acts of selfishness but of self-preservation and empowerment. By respecting his own limits, the villager taught others to respect them as well. His kindness, tempered with wisdom, became a force for good not only in his own life but in the lives of those around him. This is the essence of wisdom in action, a kindness that uplifts, transforms, and endures. Part 4. Modern-day examples and stories. Modern-day examples provide a powerful lens through which we can view the Buddha's teachings about kindness, boundaries, and mindful giving. Imagine the story of a social worker who dedicated her life to helping the homeless. For years, she operated from a place of heartfelt compassion, offering food, money, and even her own possessions to those in need. While her intentions were pure, she began to notice that her efforts were not always effective. Some individuals she helped would return repeatedly, not because they were truly in need but because they had grown dependent on her generosity. Others misused what she provided, selling donated items for personal gain rather than addressing the root causes of their struggles. Feeling drained and questioning the impact of her work, she decided to shift her approach. Instead of giving handouts, she began offering long-term solutions, such as connecting individuals with job training programs and mental health counseling. Over time, her impact grew exponentially, and many of those she helped achieved self-sufficiency. Her story illustrates how boundaries, when paired with kindness, can amplify its value rather than diminish it. Let's expand the scope of this lesson with another example, this time from a corporate environment. A manager, eager to support her team, consistently took on extra work to shield her employees from stress. Initially, her team appreciated her dedication, but over time, they grew accustomed to her intervention. This dynamic left her overburdened and her team lacking the problem-solving skills needed to grow independently. Recognizing the unsustainable nature of this pattern, she began to delegate responsibilities, offering guidance and support while trusting her team to handle challenges. This shift not only empowered her employees but also restored balance to her workload. Her kindness, now combined with discernment, created a healthier and more effective workplace. Consider, too, the story of a humanitarian aid worker who initially tried to help everyone impacted by a natural disaster. With limited resources and overwhelming need, they struggled to make a meaningful impact. After reflecting on the situation, the aid worker chose to focus on a single village, channeling resources into building sustainable infrastructure like schools and clean water systems. Though it felt difficult to say no to other communities, this focused approach transformed the chosen village into a thriving community. The ripple effect was profound. Neighboring areas saw the success and began adopting similar practices, leading to widespread change. This story highlights the importance of prioritization and the courage to set boundaries for greater impact. In personal relationships, the lessons of mindful giving are equally relevant. Imagine a friend who is always available to help, no matter the cost to their own well-being. While their generosity might be admirable, it often leads to an imbalance where their kindness is taken for granted. Over time, they may feel resentful and emotionally drained. By learning to set boundaries, perhaps by saying no when their energy is depleted, they can protect their own well-being while fostering healthier, more reciprocal relationships. These boundaries don't diminish their kindness, rather, they ensure it is sustainable and genuinely impactful. The principle of boundaries applies not only to individuals but also to communities and institutions. Take the example of a school implementing rules to guide charitable donations. Instead of accepting random contributions, they request specific items based on the needs of students, such as uniforms or books. This structured approach ensures that generosity meets genuine needs, maximizing the benefit for all parties involved. Similarly, in families, parents might teach children to share their toys thoughtfully rather than indiscriminately, instilling a sense of responsibility and empathy. These diverse scenarios remind us that the effectiveness of kindness lies not in how much we give but in how we give. The Buddha's teachings emphasize the importance of mindfulness in every act of generosity. Mindfulness helps us discern when and how to give, ensuring that our actions are both meaningful and sustainable. It also allows us to recognize the limits of our capacity, preventing burnout and resentment. Whether it's a social worker addressing homelessness, a manager guiding their team, or an aid worker prioritizing resources, the lesson is the same. Kindness, when paired with discernment, becomes a transformative force. As you reflect on these examples, consider how the concept of boundaries might apply in your own life. Are there situations where your generosity has led to feelings of exhaustion or frustration? Could setting clearer limits allow you to give in ways that are more fulfilling for both yourself and others? The wisdom of the Buddha teaches us that true kindness is not about endless giving, it's about giving wisely, with intention and care. When we embrace this mindset, our kindness can create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond the immediate moment, leaving a lasting impact on everyone it touches. Part 5. The Lesson of Discernment. The lesson of discernment in the Buddha's teachings highlights the vital balance between compassion and wisdom. Kindness is not simply about giving, it is about giving with purpose and intention, ensuring that our actions benefit both the giver and the receiver. This principle challenges us to ask important questions. Who genuinely needs my help? How can I offer assistance in a way that uplifts both of us? Am I acting out of guilt, fear, or obligation, or am I offering my kindness from a place of genuine compassion? These questions serve as a foundation for practicing discernment and help us avoid the pitfalls of blind generosity. To better understand this concept, imagine a captain steering a ship through unpredictable waters. The captain must decide when to hold firm against the current and when to allow the natural flow of the tide to guide the journey. Similarly, discernment requires us to navigate the complexities of kindness with mindfulness. It is not about shutting ourselves off from helping others but about making thoughtful choices that ensure our efforts are meaningful and sustainable. Consider a friend who frequently asks for financial help, not because they lack the ability to manage their resources but because they have grown accustomed to relying on others. Without discernment, you might feel compelled to continue giving out of a sense of obligation or fear of damaging the relationship. However, by practicing mindful compassion, you could offer a different form of support, perhaps by helping them develop better financial habits or connecting them with resources for financial literacy. This shift not only empowers the friend to address the root of their struggles but also preserves your own energy and resources for others in genuine need. The Buddha's teachings also encourage us to examine the motivations behind our kindness. For instance, giving out of guilt often leads to resentment, while giving out of fear can create an unhealthy dynamic of dependency. A parent who indulges their child's every whim to avoid conflict may temporarily keep the peace but risks fostering entitlement or a lack of gratitude. By pausing to reflect before acting, we ensure that our kindness stems from authenticity rather than emotional reaction. Practicing discernment also involves recognizing and respecting our own limits. Just as a farmer cannot endlessly plant crops without allowing the soil time to recover, we cannot give endlessly without replenishing ourselves. Overcommitting, whether in relationships or responsibilities, often leads to burnout, making it impossible to continue supporting others effectively. Discernment allows us to set boundaries that preserve our energy and well-being, ensuring that our kindness is both impactful and sustainable. This principle is especially relevant in today's fast-paced world, where constant demands for attention and assistance can leave us feeling stretched too thin. Social media alone exposes us to countless appeals for help, from fundraising campaigns to global crises, creating a sense of urgency that can be overwhelming. Without discernment, we may feel compelled to respond to every request, spreading ourselves too thin and diminishing the effectiveness of our contributions. By aligning our actions with our values and prioritizing where we can make the most impact, we can channel our efforts into meaningful change. In relationships, discernment is equally important. Imagine a colleague who consistently relies on you to complete their tasks, or a family member who turns to you for emotional support but rarely reciprocates. While it is natural to want to help, discernment allows you to recognize when these dynamics become one-sided. Setting boundaries, though initially uncomfortable, creates space for mutual respect and healthier interactions. It ensures that your kindness does not come at the cost of your own well-being. Ultimately, the Buddha's lesson on discernment is a call to embrace mindfulness in every act of kindness. True generosity is not about endless giving, it is about wise giving. Just as a ship captain steers with care, balancing effort with the natural flow of the tide, we too must navigate the currents of kindness thoughtfully. By asking ourselves reflective questions, examining our motivations, and respecting our limits, we can transform our compassion into a practice that uplifts everyone involved. This balance allows kindness to flourish, not as a source of depletion but as a wellspring of mutual growth and fulfillment. In the end, the villager's story teaches us that kindness is not just a gift, it's a conscious choice, one that demands care, clarity, and courage. When combined with mindfulness, kindness transforms from a simple act into a profound force that nourishes both the giver and the receiver. The Buddha's timeless lesson reminds us that boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges that connect us with others in ways that are respectful, sustainable, and empowering. True compassion doesn't come at the expense of your well-being, it arises from a place of balance and strength. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed, unappreciated, or stretched too thin, take a moment to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, am I giving from a place of genuine care, or am I driven by guilt or fear? How can I honor both my limits and the needs of others? Remember, setting boundaries isn't about withholding kindness, it's about preserving its integrity. By protecting your capacity to give, you ensure that your kindness has the power to uplift everyone it touches, including yourself. Before you go, consider this: what would your life look like if you practiced mindful kindness every day? How might your relationships change if you set boundaries that empowered both you and those around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the courage it takes to give wisely and the peace it brings when we do. Thank you for joining us on Buddha's Odyssey. If today's lesson inspired you, make sure to hit the like button and share this video with someone who might need it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode, a journey into the wisdom of letting go and embracing inner peace. Remember, the path to a more mindful, balanced life begins with one small, intentional step. Let that step start today. See you next time.